All right. So, Dave Hataj, brother, I am super excited to have you on the podcast today. We just spent probably 20 minutes talking before we hit record. We have a lot in common, and I look forward to introducing you to my audience. Brother, thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here, Jason. We talk and shop and couplers and gears and all that fun stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, we do have a lot in common.
that would probably bore most of my audience. So, Dave, you have a really fascinating story from, growing up, college, career transitions. So, take some time to walk the audience through that. What's your background, brother?
Well, it's pretty funny because I was working in the shop since age 5, and I remember running a big manual hacksaw, and just my sisters and I would have to come down to the shop after school because my parents had just started this little gear business in Edgerton, Wisconsin. And by the time I was 18, pretty much could run any machine in the shop, the saws, the mills, the lathes, the gear hoppers, and back then everything was manual.
Yeah.
I was a journeyman by the time I was 22, and by that time I'd had enough. It was just like, I'm sick of this. There must be something more. And my worldview of manufacturing was, I really took it for granted. I thought, oh, my dad runs a gear shop. Who cares about gears? There
Yeah.
must be something more exciting out there, right? But the bigger issue was we have a long history of alcoholism in my family on both sides. And my grandpa was actually he died a homeless person in Chicago, my dad's dad. And so my dad struggled with this, kind of the same issues, but he he was functional. I mean, he started this business and he built it on quality, value, and service. But back in those 70s, early 80s, a lot of shops, a lot of businesses, you just drank, you
Yep.
go out to lunch and you
Yep.
drink, and
Yep.
you'd have, my dad actually had a quarter barrel of beer in the lunchroom fridge. He took out all the shelves, put a quarter barrel there instead. But it was a pretty decadent environment because pornography was everywhere. Just a really kind of hard, dark place.
Yeah.
And I was heading down the same path, and I was drinking heavily as a teenager. I think first time I was drunk was a family wedding at age 8, and so by the
Oh my
time I was,
gosh.
yeah, well, people were giving me screwdrivers,
Yeah.
and I just thought it was orange juice, and everybody was laughing because there's
Jeez. Wow.
watch this little kid stay around. Everybody was laughing like whatever, and I felt good. I didn't know understand the effects,
Yeah.
but by the time I was 15, 16, I was drinking really heavily and smashed a couple of cars. At 17, 18, and really became suicidal, dark, depressed, had no sense of purpose in life whatsoever. And then I'm working in the shop. I was doing my apprenticeship at age 19, and I was also doing long distance running. I discovered that was kind of my escape. So I was doing marathons and other stuff, and there was one day I was just really depressed, running. Woe is me. What's the point of life? And not to be too weird, but a voice came out of the bushes, and I thought someone was playing pranking me, and it was so real. The voice said, "You are not alone," and I literally stopped, and I'm looking around like, "Come on, what's going on?" And I remember I could show you on the road exactly where it
Where it's
happened.
at.
Yeah. And I stopped, and the voice came again and said, "You are not alone." And everything and all the crap in my life from earliest childhood kind of flashed through my eyes. And I knew at that moment God was real. And I just floated home. And I was filled with this insane sense of love and purpose. The tricky part was my dad was an angry atheist. My mom was a devout believer.
Mm.
So I had to navigate between them. And it was so weird, Jason, that I went home and I started reading my Bible in secret
Yeah.
because I didn't want to, tick my dad off. Like,
Yep.
oh no, my kids become one of these religious zealots.
Yep.
And I waited for them to go on vacation for about a month or two, and then I went to our local church and walked in and actually met my best friend at that, and we're still really, really good friends. But that started me on a journey that, when a young guy becomes all zealous and excited for God, what's the career path, right?
Yep.
Oh, you gotta go to
Ministry.
the ministry.
Yeah.
Ministry. Exactly. And everybody had me pegged to be a pastor. And I did youth ministry. Ended up getting out of the shop and going to California with Athletes in Action, and got a job in a big church. And I actually went out there, Athletes in Action, to do triathlons, which was kind of a big thing getting off the ground back then. And I got out there and I wanted to get as far away from my family as possible, and got a job as a pastor to college students, even though I'd never been to college. God's sense of humor. I think they hired me as the Wisconsin hick.
Yeah.
I'm in
Oh, there you
Newport
go.
Beach,
Oh,
California. And
California. Yeah.
yeah. I'm telling my hunting stories and my dog stories, and they're, maybe they just saw me as, kind of some sort of comic
Entertainment.
really.
Right?
Yeah. But the thing is, the group exploded to a point where it went from 10 to 125 people or so, college students, because all I knew was to read my Bible, worship, and to pray. And I didn't have any other training besides that. And the problem was I got in over my head. I was 24 at that time, and I'm dealing with some major issues with a lot of students, and I just burned out. And I won't get into the whole details of that story, but I ended up resigning, or being forced to resign for some very weird reasons. That kind of really tainted my view of church at that time. But mentor said, you need to go to university. You got to get a 4-year degree. And that's the drum that people have been beating for decades, right?
Yeah.
You got to go to college, got to
Yep.
go to college. So I did, went to University of California, Irvine, got a degree in social science, which still not really sure what that is. Uh, and I'm actually glad I went, because I kind of gave me an interesting worldview. But the church experience was so damaging that one of my mentors said, you need to really figure out what you believe, because I think so much of my faith was tied up in church,
Yeah.
but not necessarily that real deep relationship with God. So I ended up going up to, I'm newly married, went up to Regent College up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And at that time, people like J.I. Packer and Gordon Fee and James Houston, some really kind of big name professors at the time, Eugene Peterson and some of these folks, he wrote The Message and some of these different
Yeah.
things.
Yep.
They were all there, and people kept saying, oh yeah, you're going to be a pastor. And I'm like, no, no, I'll do anything but. And so the funny story was at the end of I think it was the first semester or second semester. This must have been the second semester. I took one of those classes like, what's your gifting? What's your background? What God's called me to do? And I've been doing, short-term mission work in Tijuana and inner city LA, and running youth groups, etc. And at the end of the class, it came back with your summary of what you're meant for. And it actually said, quote, you're ideally suited to run a small family-run manufacturing business.
That's bizarre. You're like, really? That's interesting.
No, it wasn't just real. It's like, no, not do anything. No, don't send me back to the shop, please. But I had to take that seriously. And my wife went home, told my wife, and she cried because she wanted to be in her family, but I don't think she really understood what this entailed. And so the school allowed me to do a master's project of what would it look like to bring biblical values into a very dark place, because my hole in my faith at that time was, Jesus, I've seen you work and doing some miraculous things in many different places, but there's no way you can help my family or be relevant in a gear shop.
That's right.
Blue collar, didn't make any sense to me. So we came back. I studied systems theory, family stuff, and culture, how to change a company, and all of that. And I half joke, but it's not. It's more than a joke. The first 2 years were hell, and then it got worse.
Yeah, you said that. Now, Dave, at this time now, you're a student studying at the shop, or you're back at the shop when you say the first 2 years were hell? That was when you came back?
I am back at the shop.
Yeah.
Right.
Full time.
And
With dad? With dad?
With dad.
Okay.
And dad and mom had begged me to come back for 5 years, 6 years. And they finally gave up that I was ever going to come back. And so when I proposed and my dad was starting to have health problems. So I said, okay, to honor him and my mom, and to really have this sense of calling to come to a blue collar shop, to see if the gospel's relevant even here, I had to get back into it. And I thought it'd be 2 years. We'd sell the company, and then God would really show what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
For the rest of our lives. And that's been 32 years. That was 32 years ago, and I'm still here.
Can't get anyone to buy it.
Yeah. And so it's been a journey. I mean, the first 10 years were really hard because we're trying to change a culture. and my dad had hired fellow alcoholics, and there was a lot of infighting. We had three employees that took that basically took our computer records, our customer records, and tried to start their own business and slandered us horribly. And it was just this incredible hard journey of, we have three little boys now, and the stress of the business, and the church didn't know what to do with us. The local church, people often looked at us like, and I remember Christian friends saying, "You're selling out. You're not going into the ministry,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
going back to the family business." They don't see any relevance to manufacturing or the trades or anything in the sense of what God could work through us and in us through. So at the 10-year mark, things really started to turn around, and I started going, okay, I still wanted out. I'll be honest. But over those years, my theology really started to change, where I'm realizing being in a business, in a small community or any kind of business, we can have an amazing impact on people and on our community.
Yeah, that's right.
And that led eventually, 2010, I went into a doctorate program of all things to figure out how do you minister to kids, high school kids that are blue collar, who aren't college bound. How do you help them find their place in life? And out of that, which I'm sure we'll talk about, came this initiative called Craftsman Character.
Yep. I want to say, especially for people listening that have never experienced working in a manufacturing facility that is literally spiritually, emotionally, culturally, and physically dark and negative. And I have, Dave, my first job in a factory, I was a welder. And out of high school, wasn't sure what to do, all the same type of thing. And I knew how to weld. I'd done that in Career Center, and so I go into this place, and it was extremely normal for guys to leave at lunch and go get a 40 ounce. For those that don't know what a 40, right? A 40 ounce or a beer at the Shell station, and then drive around the country block drinking that. I came into work. I remember coming in one morning, and my supervisor and team lead were there before me, and they're in the paint booth smoking a joint. I mean, they're not hiding this. This is, you could buy any illicit drug in the plant that you wanted to. These guys for fun would stick empty 20-ounce pop bottles full of acetylene into steel tubing and run it down the line. And when the guy started welding on that section, it'd blow the tubing up. That was
Oh
fun.
my gosh.
That was a prank.
Jeez.
So seriously, man, I'm like 19, and I'm 19 years
Wow.
old, and these guys are, a lot of them a lot older, but just an awful, horrible place. And so to have someone come in a leadership role and say, we're going to bring light and truth here, and we're not going to be forcing people to take Bible studies at break. That's not what this is about. This is about bringing the goodness of God, the beauty of God, the beauty of Christ into the workplace, and translating that, applying it to a business culture. And so, I can literally taste and hear and see. I can what that place looks like, because I've been there, and I just want to make sure people understand. And I'm sure some people have, but if you haven't worked in and fortunately they've become more and more rare just culturally, I think people don't necessarily want, but it was, just like you said, pornography everywhere, like all over the walls, like just absolutely no shame. So that's that's a big challenge. That's a challenge.
Well, and like I said, that was the whole of my faith, because we can go to church and we can, sing hymns and whatever. But if the gospel is the gospel, if God does really care about the lost, the blue collar world to me is that lost people group that we would send missionaries to overseas to minister to.
They're right here.
We have a whole segment of our population that has no idea what the kingdom looks like, or so get in the shop and contextualize the gospel. Like you said, we're not preaching at them. And I don't demand people share my faith. I'm open about my faith, but
exactly.
But I demand we have shared values.
Yes.
And I think when you boil down the kingdom of God, it's values of goodness and excellence, of love and truth and honesty and dignity, and community and all of those things that a lot of blue collar folks have no idea what that looks like.
That's right. Yeah. And to be able to have the opportunity to come in and love them and work with them and respect them and honor those guys and just treat them as we're called to treat people by Christ. Love God,
Yeah.
love others,
Yeah.
and love them. I mean,
Yeah.
truly love them. It's a bright light in a dark place. So
Yeah. If you want a challenge.
yeah. Yeah. Hey, before we go on to the next question, so you wrote a book about that experience.
Yeah.
You wrote a book, and I love it. And so my son is a auto mechanic and a shop owner. In his
Cool.
late 20s, him and his wife own a shop. So I'm like, you have to read this.
Oh.
Talk a little bit about your book, and so people
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah, thanks. So I got sick, and this was way pre-COVID. It was like probably 2016, 17. Just stressed. I mean, most of it was just absolutely burned out and exhausted. Just the stress of the business. I was going back to school, raising three boys. We were actually doing short-term mission trips to Honduras, and I just reached the breaking point. And so I actually had to withdraw from the shop and only work. Most pastors would call it a sabbatical, but in the working world, a sabbatical was I only worked 35 hours a week.
It's 65 or 70.
Yeah, exactly. So the first year I did everything wrong. I tried to rest, and by the second year, the doctor said you need to rest even more because I came back too early. So that second year I got a lot of rest and I was starting to feel better. I'm like, well, what do I do? And my shop as a leader, I needed to pull away to help my young leaders, grow and develop on their own, get out of their way. So like, well, now what do I do? I can't go back to what I used to do because one, it was just too much, but two, I need to give room to my leaders. So I started to write, and I really felt, it was kind of funny because I thought, because mortality, back then I was in my mid 50s, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I have a, if I don't get this figured out, I have a short time frame here left on earth if I don't figure this out. So thinking about my mortality, I thought, what would I say to my boys? All grown sons, great kids, all believers. And what would I say to my employees as far as the legacy of the company and how I think it should be run from a faith perspective? So I started writing to them and writing about the importance of just excellence in the business and kingdom values of truth and excellence and compassion, what it means to be a leader, and taking a hard look at yourself and how you do that in really a kingdom way. And I finished it and I sent it to one of my mentors, and he said, "Oh, this has potential." And within 2 months, all of a sudden I'm on our call for our potential agent. He picked it up and he goes, "Oh, I think it's really good." And he chopped it around and he said, "Let's work on a manuscript together." And they edited it and cleaned it up, chopped around, and Moody Publishers picked it up.
Nice.
And it got published right during when COVID broke out. So sales were kind of,
all right.
It was kind of rough, but it's called Good Work: How Blue Collar Business Can Change Lives, Communities, and the World. And I really believe that we overlook the business community in the blue collar world because that's the foundation of all communities. It's blue collar people putting in roads and plumbing, electric, building and manufacturing. And as Christians, we have completely taken us folks for granted. The church doesn't know what to do with us. And I think a lot of times we're looked upon as just come to church and write a check. I mean, be honest. But there's incredible potential for us as kingdom workers in our communities. And I just think we've completely lost that sense of the dignity of work, going all the way back to the creation mandate when God says, be fruitful and multiply, flourish, help build a civilization. And for whatever reason, we've lost that sense that this is how the kingdom works, is by people being in their businesses and just being excellent in how we treat people and it's not just trying to witness to people. Our work itself, we are honoring God and it's a form of worship when we express our own creativity and our dignity through a job well done, whether it's making gears or couplers.
Yeah, that's right.
Or building a building.
Yeah.
Who in our world wants a crappy job?
Right.
Or crappy workmanship, right?
Bad service.
When you go bad service, when you go through your community, you admire good work. You
Yeah.
admire,
Yeah.
buildings that are done really well. And if you go back to Exodus, when Moses, it's a great story to me that Moses is so frustrated with the nation of Israel, gave them the 10 Commandments, and they went in. Aaron takes all the stuff and throws it into a fire, and out comes a golden calf. And Moses just disgusted, goes back up on the mountain, and he, as a leader, he's so burned out and frustrated. And he says, God, I need you to show me your glory. I need to know you're there, that this isn't just all in my head.
Yeah.
And God responds to him, and he said in Exodus, I think it's 32, if I remember right. And he says, I will indeed show you glory. I will allow my goodness to pass before you. So the glory of God is his goodness, and his goodness coming through us and in us and how we do our jobs, how we run our businesses is absolutely transforming and foundational for our communities.
Yes. Good.
So that's what the book's about.
I love it. Well, and so I will say, if you are in the blue collar industry, if you're leading blue collar teams, I know I have listeners that are, because I've talked to them. There's guys running tool and die shops. There's guys running road construction companies that listen to this show, and so get the book. And that's not why I asked Dave to be on the show. He didn't come on to promote his book. I believe in it. It's a really great book. That's why I gave it to my son as Audible. He listens to it, while he's working.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
well, thank you.
Yeah. And no, he said it was super helpful. I'm like, look, here, you're a young man running a small business, and, with blue collar guys. So, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hey, Dave, what are your spiritual disciplines? We talked a lot about your faith. You've talked about how you came to Christ. Like right now, how do you stay close to the Lord and grow in sanctification?
So I'm an introvert at heart, and I need alone time. I need silence. So to me, it's getting away by myself a lot, and just building that space in my life to listen. And obviously, I read scripture, I read books, I journal quite a bit. My daily, so it's kind of different things. I have my daily discipline, and then I have my kind of weekly and monthly and seasonal kind of thing that I do. The daily one is just getting up early and sitting quiet. I'm not into a kind of a strict quiet time, so to speak, but it is just, there's some mornings I'm so fried that I don't even have the brain capacity to read. I just can't, I'm just tired, but I'll just sit quietly and I'll say, Lord, show me my pain points today. Show me the anxiety that I have, because I think so much in being a leader is we have to be healthy ourselves.
Yes.
Because if we're toxic, we're going to project that on other people. So I want to know first and foremost, Lord, what am I struggling with today? Where's my anxiety? And help me identify that and have you deal with me on it. And then from there, it's, it might be a lack of faith. It might be just a situation where I feel I'm going to have to deal with that work with maybe a difficult employee or a problem with a customer or whatever. And a lot of it's, maybe I'm not feeling at peace with my wife or my grown children or whatever, or I just feel really insecure today. Yeah. Right. So I think there's to me, a lot of the discipline is just recognizing God is my Father who just wants me to just be with him and cast your cares upon him. But to me, it's this really loving thing where I have to constantly pray and recognize the love of God. So one of my life verses, is out of Ephesians 3, where he says, he tells, I think it's Ephesians 3:19, I believe, where, being rooted and established in love together with all God's people, you would grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. So that you may be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. And I think as a believer, that's what I need every day. I need to be filled with the love of God, so I can be, I can minister to my wife. And then apart from that, it's, I really try to just get, whether it's taking a walk with my dog, just get out in the woods, get out in the fields. And then on a seasonal level, I need that break of just pull it away. And so I read a lot of books, and my wife's great with worship, but the disciplines of silence, of being alone, controlling your thoughts, those kind of things are really important to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I remember, I think it was in your book. Anyways, I've heard you say it or write it somewhere. You're in Wisconsin, winter times, like here in Michigan, get pretty cold, and talking about just kind of being near a fire and quiet
Yep.
time. And we have a couple fireplaces in our house, and I love that.
Yep.
Quiet morning, and that's being near to the Lord.
Yep.
Nobody else around. The dogs aren't up, the kids aren't up, the wife's
Yep.
not up. Just you,
Yep.
and a
Yep.
cup of coffee and the Lord. That's good stuff.
Yep. Exactly.
Hey, from a leadership perspective, Dave, when you think about your like top 2 or 3 core leadership principles that you just always go back to, what are those?
It's going to sound kind of weird, maybe, but number one for me is they're related. It's humility and vulnerability.
I love it.
And if you're not vulnerable with your people,
Yes,
you're not going to connect with them.
yeah,
And we're all broken, right? And I think too much leadership stuff out there is you got to have your crap together. That probably shouldn't say crap, but you have to have your stuff together, right? You have to project this image of being all, I got the answers. I'm a good leader. No, I'm broken. And the transformation that I see in my people going over the last 30 years is when I'm vulnerable and share my weakness. I apologize a lot.
yes,
And it opens the door for my staff to go, yeah, okay, you're like me. And to really model that, because it opens the door for grace and forgiveness. And if we don't do that, the environment just becomes very artificial, superficial.
yes,
right?
yes,
So that's the number
Yes.
one thing. And I think the other thing for a leader, which goes along with that, is that self-reflection. I think I wrote it in my book too, but the concept of when things go wrong, do I look in the mirror or do I look out a window? Right. And what they mean by that, when things go wrong, do I look out the window and blame everybody else?
right,
Or do I look in the mirror and say, how could I take responsibility?
yeah,
This? What could I have done better? And also flip that, when things go well, do I look out the window and give everybody
right.
credit? Or do I look in the mirror and say, yo, look what
Yeah,
I did.
thank
Look how
you.
great I am,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yep,
Yeah. And I think that's just really, really pivotal, I think, as a leader, to understand that. And to model that, to model that and be authentic about it. And so along with that, going back to kind of the spiritual disciplines, I have to be in touch with what my issues are every day. Because I think, when you come in your work, we've all seen it. You can sense when people are in a bad mood. You
Yeah.
can sense when they're in a good mood. So if I'm not really in touch with my stuff, I can't fake it. There's times I've tried to fake it. I come into the shop and super bad mood, might have an argument with my wife or whatever it might have been, right? And I come in and I just feel crappy. I just like, ugh, don't want to come to work. I don't like people. Just everybody leave me alone. And I come in and kind of like, hey, everybody. People sense immediately when I walk in the door, where I'm at,
yep,
right?
yep,
And so if I'm not aware of that, I'm going to project that on other people.
Yep.
I'm going to take my bad day out of those. Because as a leader, I think the hardest thing is, and it's not faking it, but people look to us to set the example, to set the tone. So even if I'm in a bad mood, can I manage it and be
Yeah.
open about it
Yeah.
and joke about it and say, and I tell my staff, this day sucks.
yeah,
And they're laughing. We're like, okay, we'll give you space, right? And so I think it's so much of it is just modeling being authentic,
Yeah.
any more than anything else.
I think that word vulnerability, I can remember when I got it. Like I finally got it. It was
Yeah,
through a mentor and a book. I think I'll recommend the book. It was by Patrick Lencioni, who's one of my favorite leadership authors. And it's the 5 temptations of a CEO.
Yep.
And I don't care if you're not a CEO, I'm not a CEO, read it. If you're a leader, read it. And he talks about vulnerability in there and why it's so important. And like you said, Dave, if you're not being vulnerable and honest and transparent with your team, especially, might I say, I think, I'm biased, but I think blue collar folks, they see right through that crap, right?
Absolutely.
Right? You're just blowing smoke, and I won't even finish that phrase, but you've heard it many times as well as I have, right? And they know you're full of BS, and they know if you are. They'd much rather have you just be legit, genuine, transparent with them, and vulnerable with them, talking about making apologies. I just had to do that this week. I made a mistake, and it was an issue. Anyways, one of the guys on the shop floor, expressed frustration to someone else about it, and I heard about it. I went out and apologized. I said, "You're right. I should have done something. I did not do it." And you know what? He shook my hand and he was like, "Thanks," and that was it.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right. The blue collar focus, I think I love them growing up, in that environment. They have a BS meter radar unlike anybody else,
yes,
right?
yes,
And if you're not authentic, you're just part of the man. You're just part of the system.
yes.
And I think blue collar folks have been taken for granted and overlooked and just looked down upon so much that they tend to be a very cynical group.
Yes,
which I am too.
Yes, they are.
And I just show me some authenticity, show me some truth, and don't blow smoke up. You know what?
Yeah.
You're right.
And
they respect that, and they totally respect that when you're real with them.
You talk about cynicism. I'll tell you a funny story. And I told you before we hit record. I'm on a manufacturing consortium group in my area, and so we work with manufacturing companies and education leaders, and so we're just talent pipelines, skilled trades development, all that stuff. So there's a large plant in our area that I know the HR leader there. He and I have worked together before, and I said, "Hey, can you please try to get your manufacturing site leader to come to this group and see what we're all about?" And I know of this man, and he's a typical ops leader, a little cynical, a little abrasive at times. And he said, my friend said, "Okay, I got him. He will come." He said he's going to come, but he's very skeptical. And I replied in the email, I said, "If he wasn't skeptical, I wouldn't respect him."
There we go. Exactly. Exactly.
Bring your skepticism, brother. Let's work through it. So yeah.
Yep.
Hey, Dave, if you think back early leadership journey, what were some things that you struggled with early on, and do you still struggle with them? How have you overcome them? Think about other younger leaders out there. Encourage them maybe in this whatever particular thing is. Maybe they're struggling with it too.
Yeah, I think insecurity. I think more than anything else, and I still struggle with it, even though I'm 61. Where people bring expectations. I think the expectations we have of ourselves, of what kind of leader we should be, and we have to project this sense of confidence and authority, caring so much about what other people think.
Yeah.
And that's always, and I'm just wired that way. I want approval. I want everybody to like me. And I was talking to a mom recently at an event I was speaking at, and she said, and it's that old thing about when we raise kids, our number one priority is not to be their friend, right? Eventually we'll be friends when they're adults, but it's to be a parent. And as a leader, my number one priority is the health of the company. And I need to do what's best, even when it's hard, and even when people disagree, and even when I'm going to have some blowback. I need to have the confidence to know that I'm doing the right thing. And when I make decisions here, I'm getting everybody involved. I get tons of, I consult my staff constantly.
Yeah.
I want them. In fact, a great book is, if you want, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book called The Decision Maker.
No.
By Dennis Baki.
Okay.
It actually takes place in a shop. It's a fictional story, and it's how we make decisions in a shop, and that everybody should have the freedom and the authority to make decisions. And he talks about those who are closest to the problem should make the decisions.
Yes.
But there's an advice process in there. You can't just give people freedom to make all the decisions. So they got to have a team. One person is the point person. They consult with a lot of people. They consult with me. I'll give them the authority to run point on that. And sometimes I'll have to veto it. Usually I'm like, "No, you guys did a great job."
Yes.
It's a great book, The Decision Maker by Dennis Baki.
We'll link to that.
But it's so as a leader, I just struggled with my own insecurities and wanting, like I said, people to like me, and just being able to make the hard decisions when it's unpopular.
Yeah.
Right. I still struggle with that.
Yep.
I think that's just the way I'm wired.
Yep.
I think that's the number one thing.
Well, Dave, I think that's important for people to understand. So if I think back when I can tell you right now, I remember, like, it is a core memory the first time I had to write somebody up because I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And it was just it was writing a guy up. I wasn't firing him, and I was sitting with a senior HR leader who was a mentor of mine, and she did the talking. I was just kind of there as the supervisor.
Yeah.
But it is hard, and that was 25 years ago for me. And it doesn't get easy, but it gets easier, I think, because you gain some
Your own
confidence.
confidence.
Your confidence, yeah. And then I think too, I had another person on my podcast who's a mentor of mine. He and you are probably within 1 or 2 years of each other, age wise. Yeah. And he said the same thing. He said, I still struggle really, really fighting, having those tough conversations. But one of the things he said too as a motivator is he remembers when he didn't have them and how bad it gets and how harder it gets when you wait too long. And, I try to remind myself of that and also do the right things for the team and the business. That's a motivator to say this, like, this has to happen. Everybody else knows that you should have this conversation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's my biggest mistake over the years where I'm often a reluctant leader. I would love just the shop to run itself, not have to mentor people, not have to coach them. And I had a guy come in and I'm still struggling with this. In fact, it's happening right now with the other nonprofit I started, where people are looking for me to lead, and I often will give my leadership authority away or just draw back from it. And I still remember I had a guy come to my shop, or right here in my office one time. He sat down and he was actually a couple of years older than me. And he sat down and he got tears in his eyes. And he said, Dave, you have to realize when you don't lead, we all suffer. And I just went, oh,
yeah,
because he was right. When I let issues go on and I know they need to be dealt with and everybody's looking for me to step up and lead, I need to take the bull by the horns and make those decisions and confront people if I need it. And if I don't, somebody's going to fill that leadership void.
Yeah.
And it's probably not going to be what we all want it to be. Because you might get somebody that's not going to do it well. I think your staff, when you're leading people, whatever situation, if you're not, and it's not being a jerk, it's not being that overconfident leader, but it's people know you have the authority as a leader and step up and be that authentic, vulnerable, but authoritative leader that people want you to be. Yeah. If you don't do it, things just get worse.
Yep. Oh, they do. Absolutely. Yeah. If it's not addressed, it's going to get worse. Yeah. Hey, we've talked a little bit about this, but I want to get as practical as possible. So how do you, when you walk into Edgerton Gear every day, like what are some things that you do to mindfully honor Christ in the work and as you lead people and like in your interactions and decision makings and all that? Like talk some more about that.
So like I mentioned before, spiritual discipline, getting up in the morning, make sure I'm not toxic. But I write about this in the book again too. Our little interactions that we have throughout the day can be so powerful. I call them relational transactions, where it's just treating people with dignity and respect, having a smile, recognizing people, greeting them respectfully. I got guys that come in, they grunt.
They say hi to them. I have those same guys.
But that doesn't mean they don't want to be respected and appreciated and recognized, right? And so as a leader, part of me, from a kingdom perspective, is giving people dignity of recognizing them and affirming them. I think there's such a huge need out there for people to be blessed. People are so beat up and worn down and so insecure. And I think especially blue-collar people, they come with so much baggage.
Yeah.
And so to be in an environment where we're constantly blessing, and it's not gooey over the but it's as simple as saying good morning to them and hey, good job. And so to me, that's a big part of what I do. I recognize that it's kind of almost as my pastoral role to be vulnerable, open, but to bless them, right? Not to curse them, but to bless them. And I think that's huge God honoring. It's just giving people the dignity of a job well done, or even just coaching them and mentoring. One of the things that we do when people make mistakes, and I've learned this the hard way over the years, and I think I learned it from my dad because his first job, he often tells the story. This is how not to honor God. He would scrap a part when he was in his late teens, early 20s in the machine shop, and his actually became a stepfather. If he scrapped a part, he'd come over and the stepdad break a file over a machine, cuss and yell and swear at him. He'd take the gear blank and hang it over his machine and leave it there as a reminder, don't ever do that again. It was just totally humiliating.
Oh my gosh.
And I learned, so when people make mistakes, one of the first things I never yell at people. I always, okay, so what'd you learn? What'd you learn? Because I've learned they already feel bad already.
Yeah.
If they have any character at all,
That's
there's
right.
nothing I can do to make them feel worse. But to show grace and say, well, what did we learn? How can we fix this? I've had guys come in and scrapped out thousands of dollars worth of parts, and they want me to just to yell and go off on
Yeah.
them.
They feel horrible. Yeah.
They do it. And I'm like, oh, dude, sorry. And they've actually come like, would you just yell at me?
Yep.
But I like, no, I can't, because I can't make you feel worse. I think that's pretty practical right there.
Yeah.
But as far as the other aspect of our work itself, we want to make the best parts possible, right? And so I think that commitment to excellence and integrity. So not only, just all of our processes in our place, we have in-process inspection. It's really cultivating that culture of excellence, that we're going to do the best job possible. And when we send out good parts to our customer, that's God honoring.
Yeah.
When we screw up and we have to fix it and we do it as fast as possible, that's God honoring. When we treat our vendors with respect, even though sometimes it's hard, that's God honoring. And again, it's that sense of goodness in literally everything we do. When you think about the difference between good and bad, they're polar opposites. You don't want a bad gear. You don't want people to want to be treated badly. It's so easy to go, okay, well, what does it look like to be good then? Right. And it's treat people with respect. It's loving them. It's forgiving them. It's showing them grace when needed. It's even disciplining them with respect.
That's right.
Yep. It's making great parts, etc. I got a couple stories. One real quick. I had a guy that came in so wounded and broken. He, to be honest, hardly anybody can stand to work with the guy. But he's got a huge heart. He's a big burly guy. He's scary as all get out. And one day he came in, and my right hand man and I were out in the shop talking about some delivery schedules, and this guy walked by, and I said, hey, and I'm not going to mention his name, but I said, hey, what's going on? How are we doing on those parts? He blows up and starts whining and complaining. Nobody gives, and they won't use the language.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a crap. Nobody. And I said, just stop. And he just kept going on. And it was one of two times I can think of in the last 10 years when I felt the Holy Spirit say, go off. Just in a holy way, go off. And I literally, and I stopped, and I like, Lord, is that you? Because this is going to be tough. And I just felt that Lord said, yeah, you need to do this now. And it's out in the shop for a lot of people. This dude's got 100 pounds on me. Big dude. And I literally grabbed, he's got coveralls on. I grabbed his suspenders and I pulled him towards me. And I literally yelled, and I screamed at him, stop the bull. Stop the bull. And he's looking at me. And I go, stop the bull, And I said, you got to get that out of your head that nobody cares, that you're unlovable. And I said, we love you. You have to understand your environment. We want you to be successful, and we care about each other, and we care about you. And he was just shocked. He was stunned.
I'm
and
sure.
He shut up.
I'm sure.
And all of a sudden, a little tear starts coming down his cheeks. And he said, Dave, I've never been in a place where people care about me. And it's hard for me to believe that.
Yeah.
And to me, that was pretty radical example. I'm like, okay, God, thank you. That works.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it's that tough love where it's
yeah.
not, it's not humiliating them, but dude, I'm speaking truth. You need to understand I love you.
Well, right? Yeah. And I think that some people need to be communicated with 4x4. I mean, right. Exactly. I mean, there's some people who you can mention, they might want to think about doing things differently, and they'll be like, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. And then there's that guy. And I've had that guy on my team, and you can't just mention maybe he should not do that. You have to, come at him.
And you got to match their language. This is the language they understand, right? And sometimes the louder we yell, the more they feel loved.
Oh my gosh. I think you and I can share a lot of stories. It's the same guy with a different name, man. It is. Hey, let's talk about we're talking about people. We're talking about how we can honor Christ as we lead these guys that we love, these blue collar guys, and let's talk about Craftsman with character. I think this is a great point or a great time to transition into that. So,
Yeah.
explain what that is, how it came about, your passion around that, because I love it. That's
So,
great.
yeah, well, thank you. Because, like I mentioned, I ended up going back to school in 2010 to get a doctorate of all things, which is really God's sense of humor. Because I'm an apprentice. That's how I learn, and I got to do things. And this big dilemma that I think all manufacturers in the trades and manufacturing are all struggling with is workforce. We have an aging demographic. We have people that are aging out. Average age in a lot of shops are in the 50s or even early 60s, because we lost an entire generation of young people coming to the trades because high schools back in the 90s started radically reducing or eliminating their tech ed
Yep.
departments.
Yep.
So since then, for 30 years plus, we lost kids who were coming into the trades. And so all of us in manufacturers have been struggling with who's going to come in and replace, our retiring folks. And so we were poaching from other companies,
Yeah.
and we offer, $1 more an hour or whatever. And one day I was up at our local high school, where I actually went to school, talking to our tech ed teacher because he asked me to come up and help resurrect the tech ed department. And while I was up there looking at all the old equipment that I ran 20, 30 years ago, that was mothballed and still in its lathes and mills, I just felt God spoke to me and said, take a look at these kids. These kids are you.
Yeah.
This is how you were 30, 40 years ago. And they're blue collar kids. They're, quote, not college material. None of the teachers ever thought I'd go to college, and they never gave me the option. I think they looked at me
Yeah.
as like,
Yeah.
hey, he's not going to make it. There's even no point trying.
That was me. If he graduates high school, we're going to call that a win.
That's right. Exactly.
Yep.
So, and tech ed departments often at the middle long haul, cut off from the rest of the school. These kids are often socially awkward.
Yep.
They don't fit in. They're not getting any accolades for, their grades, often sports or anything. And I just felt God say, take these kids are you. And how can you help them? So that's where my whole doctorate started. It kind of changed thinking, okay, how do you reach those kids? And who are they? And what is going to make a difference to them? So spent 3 years studying educational theory, just how we learn, how we grow. And I came up with, realizing, and educators know all this, but there's 4 types of learning styles. There's those who read and write. That's how they learn. That's how majority of our educational system is set up.
Yep.
But over half of our population are passive learners, meaning we learn by doing, and part of that is also seeing and hearing. So how in the world is our entire educational system set up for a small segment of our population? We have all these kids that need to be working and doing. So the course I came up with, Craftsman with Character, is basically 4 days a week that the kids get to job shadow. And 1 day a week, I get them in the classroom. Well, the concept was, and it was only an hour and a half a day, but the concept was, can we change their worldviews? Can we talk about character and help them understand that being a team player, looking someone in the eye, showing up on time, being committed to excellence, having the dignity and pride of job well done, all of those things, having a sense of justice and courage and humility, those aren't just words, but those are the skills that you and all of your listeners, we all adapted or learned to be successful in any job.
Right.
I mean, those are the soft skills that we all need. So how do we translate those things to these kids and also give them a sense of purpose, that they're not here by accident? They are here for a reason. They have a sense of purpose. The world needs them, etc. And how do we do that? It's not by reading and writing about it. It's showing them.
Yeah.
So the whole concept is hooking them up with mentors in the workplace. And the 2 parts of that is, now they get to see what's out there for all these skilled trade jobs that they have no clue exist. So the course, a semester-long course adopted by many schools now, is 4 days of job shadowing in a variety of companies, 1 day a week in a classroom where what I often say, we deconstruct the worldview and give them a biblical worldview, even though there's no religious language in it, because I'm working with the public schools now.
Yep.
So the transformation of kids from week 1 or week 16, who are often beat down, feel worthless, no self-esteem, to a point where they're talking with adults, they're seeing the job opportunities for them. And we take them through this thing called the Craftsman Code, which I make the kids memorize. And it's really fun if you're a dad, if your listeners are dad, it's fun. I make the kids memorize number one, I am not the center of the universe. Kids have to recite that constantly.
I am not the center
Um,
of the universe.
yeah. But it's not yeah, but it's
What?
but it's not a smackdown. It's really the context that in any of our jobs, we're our like gear manufacturing, we stand on the shoulder of who came before us, right? Our trade has evolved over 100 years plus
Yeah.
in machining or whatever. So it's giving the kids appreciation for the past, helping them be more teachable. And number two of the Craftsman code, as we call it, is I don't know everything nor nearly as much as I think I do.
Yeah.
And trying to help them be more teachable. And then number three is there's dignity and purpose in my trade. So now what we do really matters. Our blue collar work is really important, no matter if you're a pipe fitter or a machinist or an
Yep.
electrician
Yep.
or whatever. And then the magic one is number four, when the kids really start to understand it. The world needs me. And when they get that into their heart and their mind, that just opens up their whole world. Number five is their pay as reward for my efforts, but it's not my main motivation. So we're kind of deconstructing the lies of our culture. And then number six is every person has unique gifts and talents. So you can't change you really can't change a person's character in 2 weeks or a month, but over the course of 4 months, it's incredible to see this transformation. I got one of the best emails ever this week, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just the last paragraph. This kid actually came, I only met him one time, and he is actually in another class in the nearby town that we got started. But he said, before I started your program, I was working at a shoe store in a horrible environment, which ultimately led me to starting smoking. I think he's a junior in high school. During my first semester, I would wake up at 7:45 to be at school at 8. I would wake up angry at the world. I was a bum. Even says this. Because of your course, I quit smoking, started waking up at 5:30 every morning. I'm in the gym 3 times a week. I start as a youth apprenticeship as a mason tender, making $18 an hour for this company in Janesville called JP Cullen. And most importantly, I'm starting to enjoy my day-to-day life a lot more. I've struggled with mental health for quite a while, and things are really starting to look up.
Nice. Oh, what a blessing.
Yeah. So and now I'm emailing this kid back and forth because now he's also asking. The funny part was he wanted my book, and now he's saying, I want to know more about faith.
There you
I
go.
want to know more what it means to be a good man.
Praise the Lord.
So anyway, that's kind of, if you go on our website, craftswithcharacter.org, a year and a half ago, I'm sharing this with our local tech school. And I got a call from a guy by the name of John Keane from Scott Ford. He's the CEO of a big 4G house here in the Midwest. He says, you got to get over here. The Navy's here. I told him all about you.
The Navy's here.
Navy?
Like the whole Navy?
The whole And I said, oh, okay, whatever. So I get over to the meeting, and people are talking about Craftsman here because we got started in the Southern community with Frito-Lay and Scott Ford and some other big manufacturers. And everybody's bragging about these kids are amazing. You know, they're blue collar kids. They're all getting into apprenticeships now. And this woman from the Navy sitting there listening, and she looks at me and she goes, okay, I have one question. And I go, yes, ma'am. And she goes, what do you need to take this national? And I'm like, huh? What do you mean by that? We need this everywhere. What do you need? And what she explained is that our nuclear subs are the only competitive advantage that we have over our enemies. The Chinese, the Russians are all up to par in our jets and our ships and so on. She goes, the nuclear subs are the only things that were a generation ahead. So she said we have 17,000 suppliers, manufacturers throughout the country, and we're not getting our subs in time. So we went and interviewed all of our suppliers, and everybody said the same thing. Workforce development, not enough young people coming in. So we need this course everywhere. So how can you help? And I go, I don't know, money, people. Like I'd have to start a whole organization. So we started talking, and 2 weeks after we started talking, and 6 weeks after that, they gave me a 3-year commitment, multi-million-dollar deal to grow this thing and try to spread it literally throughout the country. Turn my world upside down.
Yeah.
And I'm still reeling. So we are throughout southern Wisconsin. We're getting into northern Illinois. We hope to be in Michigan this next year. I got a class in Houston, North Carolina. I've got a lot of interest in Detroit, Seattle, and different places. So we're scaling up to really try to figure out, how we can help folks. if your listeners go on the Navy website, buildsubmarines.com, you might see that the Navy is sponsoring the NASCAR. They're doing commercials during the NFL season. Their website is amazing because they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to somehow figure out how can we get young people into the submarine industrial base involved in manufacturing.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
no, that's super cool. I mean, you and I, as we've talked, we both see the same problem and are working to solve it. You're definitely further ahead than I have been, but I work locally with schools and educators and other manufacturers because it's a huge problem. I mean, we started an apprenticeship program at the company I work at because we're just it's like I'm fighting for the same talent. And even when I get them, they don't have the skills that I think they should have. So how do we build that up? And that's what we're doing. As you and I have gotten to know each other, you recommended a book called Freedom's Forge. And
Correct.
so if when you talk about, well, why is the Navy worried? I mean, I think we understand that. But if you are a history buff and you like manufacturing and World War II, which I happen to love both as far as the history, learning about the history, Freedom's Forge is a book that talks about the manufacturing buildup that it took to win the war. It took soldiers. It took, unfortunately, a lot of bloodshed to win that battle. And there was a lot of hard assets that had to be manufactured. Like, and so anyways, this book is all about that and that buildup and how that happened. And without a manufacturing base, it's a national security problem at the end of the day.
And that's what the Navy has told us. That we actually have a command master chief, submarine commander, that came and spoke at one of our events, and he recommended the book. And so I went out and got the book. And what blew me away about that was I thought the U.S. involvement really started at Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1942. It actually, our national leaders and manufacturing leaders got involved in the fight 3 years before that. And to mobilize the industrial base to realize, and Michigan obviously is one of the key places that's happened.
Yeah.
Back then to get start making tanks and ships, and that book blew my mind. When you see it, how harbors were built, and it just goes on and on. It was one of the most amazing books I've read.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a particularly mind blowing for guys like us, Dave. That if you think about, if I came to you tomorrow and said, Dave, I need your entire factory to be making these different parts as soon as humanly possible. One factory, right? Tool change, die change, programming, right? Guys got to measure these parts differently. Multiply that throughout the country. And every right, stamping plants, machining plants, assembly plants. Like a retool an assembly plant that was making pickup trucks, now it's making whatever, tanks. That's a big deal. Oh, and by the way, a lot of your workforce is going to go overseas, so you got to do this with new people. And oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah. And the Navy is actually, when they come and speak at our events, it's actually pretty scary, because they can share what they can, but they said it is an issue of national security. It's actually one of the top issues in the Pentagon right now because the Chinese are intent on taking over most of the world, as we know, and they said our submarines, they don't know where they're at. And that's what's keeping them at bay. And I jokingly said to her one day, I said, hold it. So you're telling me, after some private conversations, they're explaining to me how serious this is. I said, so you're telling me that Craftsman with character can help prevent World War III? I was joking. They looked at me totally serious. They said, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
I go, oh.
Yeah. That's right.
So we're working hard to mobilize. And if any of your listeners are interested, literally go on our website. I've got a powerful team that just in the last year put together a website that if you're a business or a school, you can join an informational hour-long Zoom call and learn more. And we're looking to get this everywhere as fast as possible because the Navy has told us, I think it's the year 2027 that the Chinese have in their charter to take over Taiwan.
Yeah.
So they really believe it's only a matter of time. So there's a total sense of urgency. Turning 61, people said, when are you going to retire? For one, I don't think it's biblical.
Yeah.
And two, it's just not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, good. You and I are going to get together on that because I want to share best practices and what we can do on that side of things. Couple other questions before we wrap up, Dave. Hey, who are some of the people that you follow and listen to, podcast authors, to help sharpen you as a leader, as a believer in your leadership? Like, who do you recommend?
So one of the fun ones for younger listeners, Jordan Rayner.
I love
I don't know if
Jordan.
him and I have become good friends. I've been on his podcast a couple times, but I think he articulates the whole faith and work movement right now almost as good as anybody, especially for the younger generation.
Yeah.
And that's really, really powerful. Besides him on the, kind of some of my favorite guys are dead, but I really enjoyed, Dallas Willard. Read a lot of his stuff. I still go back to The Divine Conspiracy. One of my favorite all-time authors who's been dead a long time is George MacDonald. I still go back and read some of his fiction and some of his readings. Really ministers to me a lot. Just gives me a worldview that says the gospel is way bigger than just getting people saved.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just praying a prayer. It's this construct. People don't know George MacDonald was C.S. Lewis's mentor. That's what C.S. Lewis actually called him. So that whole idea, the Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, and that whole series, and J.R. Tolkien, all those guys had this worldview that the kingdom is really about infiltrating society with goodness, right, and standing up against the forces of evil and darkness, and being a light, which takes a lot of different. You do that a lot of different ways. We need people in machine shops that are salt and light.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I guess that
Good.
would be a few off the top of my head.
Yeah, I found you through Jordan Rayner. So that's how I find you. I'm like, well, yeah, you were on there, and I'm like, wait, what? There's a guy out there who has a journeyman's card and a business degree like me. Like that, you're the only other person.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
we're probably the only two, but there's got to be more.
There's got to be more. If you're out there, let us know. We can form a club.
That's right.
So if people want to get in touch with you, Dave, obviously Craftsman with Character website, check that out. But what if they just want to network with you or reach out to you? What's the best ways to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay. Good.
So just find me on LinkedIn or through Craftsman with Character. And I do respond to people. I'm not that famous where I'm not one of these people that get 100 emails a day. I love connecting with people.
Yeah.
And, I'll even give out my personal email. That's my shop email, just dave@edgertongear.com.
Awesome.
Just dave@edgertongear.com. I think we're part of this young man that I read this email this morning. He's emailing me every other day. And he's actually saying, I'm struggling with loneliness because I find people boring.
Yeah.
I'm irritated.
Yeah. You are definitely blue collar. Yeah.
But he's asking really deep questions.
That's
and he goes,
good.
I rather have quality of a relationship than quantity.
Yeah.
He's 17 years old.
That's
He's
awesome.
asking these questions.
Man.
And I told him this email, I was writing him this morning. I said, you are part of a small group of folks who you're going through what I call an awakening. You're waking up and asking the deeper questions of life. And I think those of us like you and I and your listeners, there's some hard questions that we all need to talk about together and to ask really, what does it look like to be a Christ follower in this day and age? That's what I think every generation. One of my mentors said, God ain't got no grandchildren, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We have to discover for ourselves what it means to follow Jesus in whatever environment that we're in our age.
Yeah.
And right now, being in a polarized culture, there's some really interesting challenges. And I think more than anything, opportunities. I think I've never seen the opportunities that I've seen in my entire life that I see now. We're kids, we want to be mentored. Business leaders want to make a difference in their communities. And we all just need to come together and talk and support each other.
See how we
like
do
what
it.
you're doing. Yeah. What you're doing is awesome. So thank you.
Well, thank you. So and thank you again for being on today. Thank you for the work you're doing. I love it because you and I just share so much of our background and the what we're doing. I mean, we're both running machine shops. I mean, that's pretty cool to be able to connect with somebody who loves the Lord and is doing that. So I'm gonna come and see you. I'm gonna come and see you soon. I can't wait for that. But yeah,
great.
Thanks for being on, brother. And I can't wait for people to hear about your story and what God's doing in and through you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Look forward to connecting.
All right.